Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs Daily War Room Update. I'm joined today with the president of the JCPA, Dr. Dan Diker, and we'll be discussing really the developments of the last few days. We're talking about the war in Gaza that is continuing on. IDF forces are continuing to operate all throughout the Gaza Strip. Most of the northern Gaza Strip has now been cleared of most of the terrorists, and the activities are now being extended into the southern Gaza Strip, into Khan Yunis, where the IDF forces uncovered a massive tunnel network leading to one of the houses of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. And that tunnel network was then blown up, really causing a great deal of damage all around, just to show the extent of the tunnel system underneath that urban environment. In Rafah, the IDF forces are also operating, obviously continuing on into that other tremendous Hamas stronghold. Further off, we're going further off to start with, from Yemen. The Houthis are continuing on with their provocations on the and threatening the freedom of navigation and the free seas through Bab el-Mandeb, through the Straits of Tiran, up towards the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. That's something which predominantly is being dealt with by the international coalition led by the US and with a number of warships in the area. The Houthis continue firing on missiles, guided projectiles that can really do precise damage, and they are being shot down by those forces in the meantime. Today we're also joined by our special guest, by Lieutenant Colonel in Reserves, Sarit Zehavi, and we're going to focus on the north, what we always describe really in very general terms as this continuation of the war of attrition by the Iranian proxy of Hezbollah in the north. We want to give that a little bit more of a fleshing out, and Sarit's really the best person to do that. Sarit is the founder of Alma, an organization which specializes in understanding the security situation in the north and everything that's going on with Hezbollah. Sarit, thank you for joining us. And so we're going to discuss with Sarit a little bit about Hezbollah's war, how much of that it really can be described as a war and not just as incidental attacks going on. What's going on also not only in Lebanon, but also spilling over into Syria, and with really the approaching Iranian militias also coming into and further basing themselves in Syria. On all of that, Sarit is going to help us to understand that complex situation. So Sarit, just give us an update. We're now on day 86 of the war with Gaza, which means day 85 of the war with Hezbollah and Lebanon. What's been going on? How far have they been attacking? How far have we responded? What type of munitions are we using? All of these questions, if we could get into them a little bit more.
So I think we kind of stabilized on a basic level of war of attrition, as you mentioned, that sometimes we see fluctuations a little bit up, a little bit down, but in general, the average is between 10 to 8, or 8 to 10, claiming responsibility on attacks against Israel by Hezbollah. Sometimes we have more attacks that are coming by Hamas as well, Hamas in Lebanon. Most of these attacks are by munition, which is either anti-tank, which in a minute I will address, missiles to short ranges. For now, short ranges meaning 10 kilometers, up to 10 kilometers from the border. UAVs, which were for a little bit even greater distances. We had last week a UAV that came from the sea and was intercepted just above Acre. This is almost 20 kilometers from Lebanon. And these UAVs are also important because this is accurate weapon when they are used, each of them has a specific address. Last week, an IDF reservist, actually the oldest IDF soldier that was killed in this war, was killed on the Israeli-Lebanese border. He was 53 years old from a direct hit of a UAV. And another type is the Burkan missiles. These are used sporadically, not at the same amount as the anti-tanks and the others, but they create a lot of damage. Burkan missiles are extremely heavy. They weigh between 100 kilos to half a ton, and they fly, because of the fact that they are very heavy, they fly relatively low, and it's more challenging to intercept them. So I've mentioned the Burkan. I want to say a few more words about the anti-tanks. Here, Hezbollah is using different kind of arsenal, different kind of missiles, some of them for shorter ranges, just around the borderline against the soldiers that are around the borderline. And sometimes we see anti-tank missiles that are launched to further distances. The most interesting incident happened this Saturday when Hezbollah launched an anti-tank missile to a distance of almost 8 kilometers. This is the most advanced missile, and it missed with a few meters. There is a video that we published that you can see the missile from the camera that was on the vehicle, that it actually missed the vehicle within a few meters. This is a problem because these missiles are not used just against tanks. They are anti-tank missiles that are used against civilians, farmers, soldiers, neighborhoods, homes, civilian infrastructures, whatever.
There was even an attack on a house in Metula that suffered a direct.
This is happening all the time.
Yeah. Sarit,
there
let's
are all the time attacks on houses in Metula, in Manara, in Bar'am, in Dovev. These are places that just come out to my mind, and I remember in Manara, out of 155 homes or apartments, we had 86 homes that were damaged, not completely destroyed. Some completely destroyed, some are damaged, but 86 homes that needs to be afterwards. We need to fix them. In Metula, you saw the hitting right to the window. This is all anti-tanks, and the problem with the anti-tanks is that we cannot intercept them. It's not about Iron Dome. It's completely different technology. You hardly have alert because it is launched from very short distance. And I think, I'm not sure that the population was evacuated because of the anti-tanks, but I am positive that the reason they cannot go back now is because of the anti-tanks.
Yeah. Sarit,
yes.
Can we let's help our participants, our viewers, understand the hidden hand behind this network of ammunition, weaponry attacks. It's clear to some in Israel, and I'm sure it's clear to you as one of the reigning experts from where you sit in the north, that the Islamic Republic of Iran and the joint command room between Hezbollah, Hamas in Beirut, as well as the command center in Tehran, is operating and dictating the pace and the choice and the actions that are happening from Syria, from Lebanon, Hezbollah, from Hamas in the south, from the Houthis that have now choked the Bab el-Mandeb Pass and basically causes belly already in the Red Sea. Help us understand strategically what we're talking about, because it seems that either the Americans, the American administration doesn't want to admit that this is an Iranian regime war against Israel in the West, as opposed to a decentralized war. We see Hamas, we see Hezbollah, we see people are not putting the puzzle together. Help us put the puzzle together.
Like you said, if I'm trying to give you examples of connection, I should start from the offensive plan itself. Okay, Hamas executed an offensive plan that is similar to the plan of Hezbollah, as was published a decade ago. Step by step, this was the plan of Hezbollah. For some reason that none of us, nobody knows the reason, okay? For some reason, there was a decision, either in Tehran or in Beirut or in Gaza, there are different interpretations to that, to start from the south rather than the north. I personally believe that everything is going according to the plan. October 7th was chosen by the Iranians, by Hamas, as deliberately as a Jewish holiday, Jewish Saturday, while many IDF soldiers are in vacation, while we are not prepared. It was easier for the Iranians to sacrifice Sunni Palestinians. I think there was an evaluation that Israel will retaliate the way it retaliates. And I think what Iran is trying to do is to create a campaign, an overall campaign, as you described, which doesn't last few months or few weeks, but much more than that, which doesn't waste all the capabilities that Iran had built in the past decade in the Middle East, including Hezbollah, within a short time. On the contrary, I think that they are walking step by step, and the situation that was created up here in the north is that it is clear to everybody that Israel will not tolerate for years a situation that 60,000 people, or maybe even 80,000 people, 60,000 were evacuated by the government, 80,000, 20,000 more decided to leave because it's impossible to live like that. It is clear to us that this cannot last. There should be some kind of an answer to all of that. And I think in the eyes of Iran, in the eyes of Hezbollah, it's kind of a win-win, because if we will deteriorate into war, this is what they wanted from the first place. And if it will not deteriorate into war that Israel will initiate, so they put Israel in a situation that is unbearable. Of course, Israel, by this narrative of the Iranians, is connected to the United States, meaning that Israel is perceived as the small devil. United States is perceived as the big devil, and that's why you see more than 90 attacks against US forces in Iraq and Syria since this war started, with only around 6 and maybe around, and it's already 7 US retaliations. Okay, you have seen, and this we didn't count exactly, but we have seen a few dozens of attacks of the Houthis from the Red Sea against Israel and maybe US ships, and they are now started, and every day we see more attacks, as you mentioned, choking the Bab el-Mandab Straits. All of this will stop within a ceasefire in Gaza, maybe, but it will not stop forever. It's not going to be a solution, even if all the different players here will cease their fire for a short while. And I think this is something everybody needs to understand. A ceasefire is not a solution. A ceasefire will enable Hamas to rebuild, Hezbollah to recalculate, and Iran to continue here and there stinging American forces in the Middle East, trying to make everybody calculate what kind of involvement is needed. But the strategy for itself is a strategy of Iran to stop the normalization project, which they are feeling very, very threatened from, to take over the Middle East by the proxies that were established in the past decade in Syria, in Iraq, of course, Hezbollah, it's even earlier than that, with extensive collaboration with Hamas, with what they are doing in West Bank, trying to infiltrate into the West Bank, not directly, it's not a chain of command. There are different relationships between these different factions and Iran. But creating this situation is definitely one campaign that is designed to put Israel in a completely different strategic situation. This is not Israel-Hamas war. I live up north. You can see the photos behind me that were taken in the past week. This one is an IDF attack in Lebanon from my hometown. Okay, and this one is in one of the communities next to the border. Instead of having the private in the garage, you have a tank. This is not
a very interesting point, Sarit. You make a very interesting analysis, because what we're hearing from you is that this is really Iran's deception strategy to Palestinianize the perception of the war. Because having just come back from the United States with a colleague from the JCPA, you hear 95% of people saying this is part of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is just, this is a deepening and a worsening and intensification, when this is exactly what the Iranian regime wants people to think, while it makes a race to the nuclear finish line, while it keeps bombing, occasional bombing, a little bit more, a little bit less. of the North, and it really is a strategic confusion that's caused by the mullahs on purpose because it underlies their subversion.
No, I think that it is Islamicating this war, not Palestinianizing, because we are Palestinianizing this war. The West, while we are calling it Israel-Hamas war, the Iranians, with all their propaganda videos before the war, and Hezbollah said it very clearly that they are building a resistance organizations to get to Jerusalem. It's not about Palestinians. They don't care about Palestinians. It's about eliminating the long arm of United States in the region, and Israel and United States represent the same thing in the eyes of the Iranians. And this is said very, very clearly in all their propaganda again and again and again. On the one hand, they want to get to Jerusalem, and on the other hand, they're completely against any Western involvement in the Middle East, and they want to defeat both of them, and that way to spread the Islamic Revolution values. This is what it is. We decided to frame it as a Palestinian conflict, whatever. They don't frame it this way. It's very comfortable for them that we are taking it to this direction. Of course, it's comfortable, but they are not saying that in Persian or in Arabic.
No, I'm saying their confusion strategy is to have us believe that it's a Palestinian conflict when they themselves know it's not. So in other words, they create mass confusion, which is all part of the, it's all part of taqiyya. It's all part of a strategy of confusing different audiences while they race to the finish line, 90% uranium enrichment, retrofitting nuclear weapons. And the next thing you know, the strategic balance of terror is completely been remade according to their plan.
So I'll say two things. First, again, they didn't hide their what's it all about, okay, right from the beginning. And if you look at the propaganda videos of Iran and of Hezbollah, you will see that when they had to deny the atrocities of Hamas, so they said we are not connected to that. This is an internal Palestinian issue. But when you see the buildup of these capabilities all over the Middle East, and what's the mission of Radwan brigades, they are not putting a Palestinian flag, they are putting a Hezbollah flag, which is the Islamic resistance in Lebanon. Okay, that's one thing. As for the nuclear issue, here I agree that we don't know. Truly, we don't know, but this is definitely an option, that the timing is not only about the normalization process of Israel and Saudi Arabia, but also about the nuclear issue. Again, I don't know, but this is definitely an option that I cannot overrule.
It's very compelling. I got just two minutes before Maurice and the three of us went on air, I got a WhatsApp from a very highly educated former IDF intelligence, who's a German-American Israeli. And he said, there's no American appetite for a war in the Middle East brought upon us by Israel, which is basically an expression of the problem. It's not analysis, because in fact, if I understand what you're saying in your analysis, this is the Iranian war against the United States and its allies. And either America doesn't understand that, or it doesn't want to understand that, or it's scared of it, or it's perceived to be weak. But as long as the United States-led Western alliance does not understand that it is the target, and it's using Israel as, in a way, a football, if you will, to get to the United States, I think then we're all in a bit of trouble.
I will put it, from my very personal point of view as a resident of the Galilee, to say that Israel has initiated all of that, or will initiate another war. I think that people should come here and understand what happened to the Israelis since October 7th. We were all part of that conception, all of us, including myself. We believed that if we will refrain from all-out war, doesn't matter whether it's Gaza or Lebanon, okay? All-out war against our enemies, we will be able to contain, we will be able to manage the conflict, we will be able, to defend the state of Israel or secure the state of Israel much better than going to an all-out war like you see now in Gaza. And I think that what we have learned is that these kind of capabilities must be treated, must be eliminated, because eventually if you have 18 years of rockets that are being launched against our south, and then it is ending in a massacre, in a ground invasion, there is no deterrence. It's not about Israel's policy, it's about the capabilities. And I think this is exactly the situation with Hezbollah. Hezbollah developed with Iranian support capabilities that needs to be addressed this way or another. That needs to be addressed because, you know, as the resident of the Galilee, I cannot sleep with the monster anymore next door, and I am practically sleeping with the monster next door. Okay, this massacre in the south was kind of a promo for us in the north to understand what was supposed to happen to us. It was supposed to happen to us. And as I've said, for some reason, the decision was to start from the south, including taking hostages as human shields, including taking the civilian communities and occupying the civilian communities, including killing civilians. All of that was part of the Hezbollah plan. And eventually it happened in the south. So what we are terrified from is a scenario that IDF will release the reservists. There will be a ceasefire that will not solve the problem, and Hezbollah will choose the date of the next massacre.
How do we know? Sorry, Mary,
So, go on.
How do we know from open source material, or maybe it's classified material, that this was the Iranian regime, this was the IRGC strategy to begin with the North, with Hezbollah? It looks what you're saying is very logical, but I'm just saying, what evidence do we have besides the assessment that this was supposed to have started in the North and copy paste to the South?
A few things, and the main thing is that I was on the border every day, and I saw Hezbollah on the border every day in the past year. It was very clear to me the preparedness of Hezbollah on the border and the fact that Radwan brigades are already there. We've seen them. We learn how to identify military operatives of Hezbollah, even if they are not wearing uniforms, though in the past few months they were also wearing uniforms. They completely ignored the international arrangements there with UNIFIL. So that's one thing. If you look at the operational level, again, there is a plan that was published. I don't have any classified information. Alma Center is all about open source information. And there is a plan that Hezbollah published in its TV station about the offensive plan of Hezbollah. And it is exactly the same plan as we've seen Hamas executing in the south. And third, in the Alma Center, we published it. We found a kind of a leaflet, a flyer that Hezbollah sent to his own operatives. We evaluated that as reliable, preparing their hearts and minds for war. This was a year ago, just before signing the gas deal, okay, that marked the maritime border. Nasrallah was serious in his threats before the gas deal, and Israel chose the gas deal rather than, enabling Nasrallah to go to war. But it doesn't mean that Nasrallah made any obligation, or Hezbollah made any obligation not to go to war with Israel. We just prevented the war at this very specific timing of the signing of this, maritime border marking, and then enabled the gas to be taken out of the sea. But Hezbollah is already now building the excuses for the next war, and building the excuses of why it's not interested and it's not going to withdraw from South Lebanon. It is completely entrenched in the population and in the villages of South Lebanon. If you just look at the list of the casualties of Hezbollah since this war started, all those that who are launching the anti-tanks, and IDF is killing them either before they are launching or just after they are launching the anti-tanks, you see that most of them are from South Lebanon, from the towns of South Lebanon. So for them, they are practically defending their homes. So why would they withdraw? There is no reason for them to withdraw north to the Litani River and all these arrangements that are now being discussed. I think that to see with your own eyes how the border looked like, how Hezbollah was everyday activity on the border, the fact that there was a launching of Hamas rockets on last Passover, 36 rockets were launched from Lebanon within 20 minutes, actually above my home. And I think this didn't happen since the previous war, such a barrage of rockets coming from Lebanon. And then anti-tank missiles against Rajar in June, and an infiltration by a terrorist in March. The escalation was daily. Clashes between IDF soldiers and Hezbollah on the border daily. UNIFIL reported 600 crossings of from Lebanon into Israel. This is not immigration. These are not people who came to search for new life in Israel. These are crossings and going back to Lebanon just to touch the fence, like Hamas had done in Gaza. Again, this is preparing for an invasion. I think this is enough indications.
By the way, there was an infiltration. I'm going to turn to Maurice. There was that infiltration in March 2022. I'm sorry, March 2023. Actual infiltration, which seemed to be a test as to how far south an infiltrator, an Iranian infiltrator, could actually succeed. Correct?
Maybe it was sent by Iran, but himself he was probably not Iranian. We don't know his identity. We evaluated that maybe he was a Palestinian living in Lebanon. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is that the major plan was prepared. Hezbollah was prepared on the borderline. There were sequence of meetings between Nasrallah and the Iranian foreign minister, and then Nasrallah and Hamas and Islamic Jihad. These guys are constantly meeting all the time to build a strategy in the Middle East. Everything is coordinated.
So I think Dan and sorry, I think there are two major things that Sarit touched upon, which require a little bit of a deeper discussion. Firstly, in answer to your question regarding the involvement of the Iranians, Sarit's answer was very clear. Firstly, we've seen all of the Hezbollah activists, terrorists, preparing themselves on the border for a long period of time. But secondly, and most importantly, I would say, because it's the same for Hamas and it's the same for Iran, these terrorists don't hide their intentions. Hamas said that they were going to infiltrate Israel and swarm the communities, kill people and take terrorists. We know that. That was intelligence that we received already in 2022. We know that Hezbollah has said exactly the same thing. We know that Iran has expressed its desire to destroy Israel. Our problem, what it seems to be and what appears to be America's problem, is that we just don't believe what they're saying. And we has to come to that stage where we actually take these people seriously, that they actually mean what they say, and that they have an intention to carry out the actions that they were actually talking about. That's the first thing. The second thing is what Sarit said about the new modus operandi of Hezbollah is important. Hezbollah, if previously Hezbollah maybe recruited terrorists from the northern part of Lebanon and then came down southwards with those forces, they've now in the last 15 years since Resolution 1701 actively recruited terrorists in the southern areas of Lebanon.
I think from day one they recruited from both places, and it's just much more people than it used to be.
It's
because
just more people than it was, but
Yes.
now the basis is to really to undermine the idea of 1701. You can't say to these people, well, you have to now redeploy north of the Litani because they live there. These are people that aren't going to move, that aren't going to change the place where they live. And so another solution as of 1701 that the Americans are now trying to work on, and we saw reports that Amos Hochstein is due to visit Lebanon early next week. That's the same type of idea that they're discussing. So we're never going to get to that situation where Hezbollah pulls back north of the Litani, because these are people who live in the south. They're never going to be taken out of their homes. No UN resolution will ever mandate that. And that's something that has to be taken into account as well.
I think eventually, if you try to summarize the problems with 1701, is first that there is no enforcement. The word enforcement actually is not even said in this resolution. There is a misunderstanding or a deliberate misunderstanding of who should enforce the resolution, whether it's the United Nations or the Lebanese army, depends who you ask. The bottom line is that nobody enforced the resolution. Second, there is no deadline. Okay, 17 years, nothing happens, no deadline. Okay, what can we do now? Hezbollah became only stronger than it used to be since 2006. And third, that there is kind of an equation that was created, that Hezbollah is now saying, okay, you want to talk about withdrawing north to the Litani River, 20 kilometers from Israel? Fine. But what about Israel demands, the demands from Israel, which are withdrawing from Rajah, withdrawing from Sheba farms? And this is a problem because Rajah, these are Israeli citizens that due to the United Nations, the blue line goes in the middle of the town. So this is a humanitarian question. And I can't understand why the UN is not addressing that as a humanitarian question. The only one I heard that is actually saying that this is a humanitarian question is the US ambassador to Lebanon that says something around that in the past week. And finally, I understand that people are dealing with the question. But the fact that the kind of an equation was created, the easiest thing is to go to Israel, to ask Israel to follow these demands, and then we'll see. And I think the opposite should happen. First, Hezbollah should meet the demands of the international community and the security needs of Israel, and then we'll see.
See, that, Dan, should really have been the solution prior to reaching the gas agreement with Lebanon by the demarcation of that exclusive economic zone. All of these subjects, Rajah, the Sheba farms, every point of confusion, of conflict along the border should have been included in that comprehensive settlement. And that, I think, was one of the major failures that resulted from that agreement being signed, leaving all of these points open for Hezbollah to clearly use in the future as another basis for starting a war.
And the reason, I think, is, Sarit and Maurice, is that Israel has, unfortunately, by its own hands, undertaken a major strategic failure since really in the last years, not understanding or not admitting or not uniting around the fact that the Islamic Republic of Iran and its IRGC proxy strategy declared their intention to decimate and destroy Israel through a strategy. And what Israel has done, and hopefully now, the October 7th massacre and its aftermath will help Israel shuffle the cards and unite it in a united way, talk about a complete strategic reset for its own survival, because still today the West believes, throughout the European Union and in the United States, they're focusing on the wrong issue. They're focusing on the day after Gaza as a Palestinian issue. They're focusing on the PA. They're focusing on Judea and Samaria, and they need to be focusing on an existential threat that is being carried out by the Islamic Republic of Iran to where you live, Sarit, and to where 100,000 people have been displaced in the north and another 125,000 people are being displaced in the south. And the answer is in Iran. And if people in the West and Israel don't, in a united way, and let me just say, when Dan Halutz, the former chief of staff, comes out and says things that are totally irresponsible, it endangers Israel's strategic position and even an existential position. So what we're trying to do together with you, Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, Alma, and other strategic centers, is to refocus the Israeli body politic, beginning with decision makers and to our friends in Washington, that the day after Gaza is far less pressing, frankly, than the major strategic threat happening where you're sitting right now. And if we don't realize that, we're going to be in even bigger trouble than we are right now.
I agree that Iran is behind that. I agree this is not about Israel-Palestinian issue at all. And we can continue to talk about the options with Palestinian Authority, whatever. These are all local solution. What I think is that Israelis knew that. And in Israel, it was clear to us that Iran is gradually taking over the different arenas against Israel in the past decade. It completely changed the Middle East, actually, in the past decade. What was not clear to us is how to deal with that. So we kind of had an accurate analysis of who is behind the troubles that we are experiencing in various fields, but the way we chose to deal with it was actually the old way of, again, trying to maintain, to contain the conflict and manage the conflict. And I totally, I'm saying that again, of course I can criticize, what happened here. And a lot of questions will be asked about October 7th. But on the other hand, in a way, I used to say that IDF is Israel Defense Forces, that if we will initiate war, Netanyahu will initiate war, doesn't matter if it's against Hamas or Hezbollah, nobody will give him the legitimacy to do it, even not among Israelis. For us, in every family there is a soldier, the very natural tendency is to avoid war as much as possible. Eventually, what happened is because we avoided taking care of the threat coming from Hamas, we experienced these horrifying results in the south. And again, and now we need to find a way to address this threat from the north, because the same capabilities exist, and we may face the same results once the reservists that are now defending me will be released, once the US carrier will go back home. It's really, for me, it's a big question. What will happen to us then? How are we going to prevent the next massacre? I know that there are many things that IDF can do, with regard to defense of the communities themselves that were supposed to be done, for example, in the south, okay, in the tactical level. But it's not going to solve the strategic problem. And here I agree with you. The first step to solve the problem, before discussing in details what kind of solutions are needed, is to agree upon the problem, is to agree that the problem lies in radical ideologies, which one of them is ISIS. Everybody likes to talk about ISIS, but the other one is Iran. And in some cases, they're even working together in a way.
One of the problems, I think, Sarit, as we watch President Obama basically completely refashion the problem of the Middle East, and I think this is a major source of the problem, is when President Obama said basically that the Iranian regime is part of the solution to the Middle East, it's not the problem. He inverted, he recast ISIS, Qaeda and ISIS as the main terrorism problem in the Middle East, ideologically and also in terms of its execution. As we say in Hebrew, miftzai, the problem was actually reversed, that it was the Iranian regime that was the source of the problem. But because that entire calculus was inverted, Israel spent 8 years fighting that particular. I mean, Netanyahu, as you know, he and President Obama clashed so many times in those 8 years that it enabled Iran and its proxies to build up while Israel was actually fighting on the wrong battlefield.
Look, I'm trying in Alma Center not to get into all this politics. It's very comfortable for me to do it from the small town that I am in northern part of Israel. I think that the U.S. policy must adopt a consistent approach toward the Middle East that really understand the gap between the cultures, meaning that if here in the West we cherish life, this radical ideology of Iran, by the way, also ISIS, I agree, but also Iran, cherish death. So even when we speak about deterrence, you cannot deter something with threatening him that he will die. You can deter him with threatening him that he will not succeed in his mission because he has no capability in succeeding in his mission. And that's why eliminating the capabilities is highly important. But damages and all these, terms that I hear, Hezbollah is deterred, Hezbollah is surprised. It is not deterred and it is not surprised. It is what it is. It is cherishing death, and that's why it has the interest to put Israelis and Lebanese alike at this tremendous risk while hiding these weapons inside the homes, and now using these mosques and homes to launch the missiles from there into Israel. I can tell you that only in the last week, we have seen an anti-tank launching against a church in Christmas in Israel, from Lebanon into Israel, in a church in Israel. We've seen a launching from a mosque in Lebanon into Israel, okay? Direct, again, these accurate missiles of anti-tanks that I've mentioned. And we see Hezbollah more and more launching these missiles from areas which are populated, which they know that if the IDF will retaliate, civilians will get killed, and then they will have more reasons to drag us to an action-reaction circle.
What as we have just a few minutes left, what role do you see that the role of perception and what we say in Hebrew, toda'ah, and we say in English, perception or influence management plays in this entire strategic calculus that we see playing out now. I know that I think it would be a fair assessment to say that Israel has been pretty poor, pretty bad at using, on a national level, perception management, influence operations in order to deter its enemies, as opposed to physical kinetic warfare. What's your sense about, because on the other hand, Iran has been very good at, Hezbollah has been very good at, Hamas has been very good at, the PA has been very good at, PLO, Fatah, all of our enemies have been very good at what we call toda'ah, perception management. And, it seems that Israel says if it doesn't blow up in your face, it's not dangerous. What's your sense?
Actually, look, all the players that you mentioned are not exactly democracies. So they can all speak at the same voice and the same opinion. They have the luxury, if you like, to speak at the same voice and the same opinion. I am very proud of the Israeli democracy, even though sometimes people are saying things that are not comfortable for, I don't know, the official Israel, whatever, as you mentioned before. But we cannot have the same success as a democracy. And this is a small price that I'm willing to pay to live in a democracy rather than in a dictatorship. That's one thing. Second, if we speak about social media, for example, which is a good example, we cannot win against the algorithm. This is something that I in Alma Center, I ask these questions every day, because we publish a lot of information, but the algorithm eventually doesn't cross into those who disagree with me. Very, very little. Only those who truly interested and truly searching for information will find me. But the algorithm will not give them my information automatically if they disagree or they hate Israel and they know that Alma is an Israeli organization. So with social media, it's truly a challenge. So what's left? Eventually, what is left is to tell the truth face to face. That's why Alma Center is a research and education center, because we truly believe in the face to face, like what we are doing now, or with interviews or briefings in different ways. And that way, eventually, to give people the information, I believe that those who are online with us now are kind of ambassadors afterwards to once they get this kind of information, and they can afterwards represent everything we just discussed back in the US. Because we will not win this I hardly believe in Hezbollah and influence operations, because we don't have, by the way, we don't even have the same scale that the US can do when we speak about PSYOPs. Okay, IDF is much smaller than the US Army, right? So, and you need mass operations to actually succeed in creating mass in the social media, while again, if you look at the numbers of those who are against Israel and those who are for Israel, the numbers are against us here. So I think the only way to do it is to provide as much as possible reliable, current, relevant information to anybody who is willing to listen. That, by the way, doesn't matter what his opinion is. Ashpa'a or Toda'ah, we should leave these fields to the non-democratic player, but we should listen to their ashpa'a or toda'ah. And if we will listen to these very carefully, how they are doing these PSYOP operations on their populations, we will understand better the ideology that I've just talked about, the distribution of the Islamic revolution and these values of loyalty to the supreme leader and Jerusalem as a core value, and radical interpretation of Islam, and the cherish of the culture of death, what we talk about, the culture of death. If we as analysts will listen to their propaganda, we will understand that listening to their propaganda can be a very good tool to understand their point of view. And in the West, we tend to ignore propaganda automatically, right, and overrule it as lies. Propaganda may be lie with regard to capabilities, but it's not a lie with regard to narratives, to intentions, to ideologies. Propaganda reflects all of that.
And that I think is exactly it, Dan. The difference between dealing with capability, dealing with neutralizing a bomb, neutralizing the capability to shoot a weapon, as opposed to neutralizing the intentions. That's really what we're discussing also for the day after in Gaza. this idea of denazification, taking away that basic desire to see Jews as subhumans and destroy them and murder them, rather than necessarily just seizing another weapon. If you take away that desire, if you take away the intent, then I think we can get much further. And if we take away by reference the idea, the intent of Iran to really take over the entire region, however we need to do that, whether it is militarily, but to take away that intent to really take over the entire region, that's the only way that we'll really be able to bring this area to the prosperity that it deserves, until we have that basic ability.
By the way, Iran has made it very clear. We heard it from Ahmadinejad, and during his years that he says it's online, that their goal is to take over the world. Not only as crazy as that sounds, right? I mean, as wild as that sounds, that he says is the goal of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
And they're spreading slowly but surely all through Europe, bringing that idea
Latin America
of fanatic Islam into all over the world.
Sure.
And that's something which we're seeing developing all the time. And it's a long game. They're not in this for the sprint. They're not in this for the next 3 years or 5 years. This is a 50, 100-year war that we have to understand and then bring our policy into line with that understanding.
So do you want to end it, close it?
And so that's it. Unfortunately, Sarit, thank you very much for your contribution, for analysis. It really is. I think we thank obviously also our audience and our viewers, really who do, as we understand, truly appreciate all of this analysis. It's bringing that voice, that understanding to the wider communities, to really be the ambassadors, as you said, Sarit, of presenting this in wider circles around having taken the knowledge that you've given them and that we've given them, and then using that to promote that better understanding of the Middle East. So on that note, thank you again for joining us, Sarit. Thank you to our audience for joining us. We will be back with you again tomorrow at 4 o'clock Israel time. In the meantime, for those celebrating, obviously, have a great new year. May 2024 really bring the peace, prosperity, health, wealth, and really that we're all looking for ourselves, for our families, and for really the entire world.